The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Hey, good afternoon, and welcome to this week's installment of Mark Marc in the Midday. I'm Mark Weiss. I'm with my partner, as always, Mark Littell, and a.k.a. Country. And today we got ourselves a special guest. We got Mike Shropshire, who is the author of one of my favorite books of all time. He's the author of Seasons in Hell. It's about the early 70s Texas Rangers, specifically 1973 to 1975. He covered a team that lost 105 games and probably could have lost more if they didn't get a few breaks, to say the least. So welcome to the show, Mike.
Well, Mark and Mark, thank you so much for having me. It's a thrill and an honor to be in this distinguished company, and I mean that sincerely.
Well, Mike, I certainly have several questions for you because I was obviously part of the era that you were on the beat with and around those players. And Whitey, I was around quite a bit, obviously, in Kansas City and St. Louis, and you were lucky enough to be around him as well. And we both know he's quite a tactical person, and the way he went around his business as a manager, he just had a way with words, and he had a way with people. And if he weren't a baseball manager, I'm sure he'd have been running some big company as a CEO. But you had some also interesting players during that era that you were in. I want to ask you something. Did you miss David Clyde, or was he there? Was he part of the?
Well, I was my rookie year as a baseball writer, Major Leagues, was 1973, and in fact, David was the focal point of the entire season, and so I knew David very well, and beyond familiar with that situation. Yeah, that was David came in. Obviously, the Rangers. The 73 Rangers they were a bomb at the gate, and they needed the gate attraction, and so that's it's been known that it's been said that they sacrificed his career in order to draw some fans, and there might be some truth in that, but that was really a sideshow that was something I'll never forget.
Right. Well,
he was the number one overall pick that year, and so that team was drawing probably less than 10,000 fans a game on average. And
how about closer to 5?
I was trying to be generous.
Well, you know what? I was lucky enough to have been there that night that he pitched that first game, and it was against Kansas City. And they packed it in that night, and David Clyde was it's almost like the Alamo, the rise and fall of Texas Rangers when here came the Golden Boy. And, I think he pitched 5 1/3 that night, and he did fine. And, but he ended up hurting his arm, and he was basically, like you said, Mike, the sacrificial lamb. And then, it was all kind of like downhill from there on. But Texas just never really put it in together at that point. And then Whitey was over there for, a very, very short amount of time. And because he went into Kansas City then, I don't think he really got fired. I think there was kind of an agreement between Billy Martin and Texas because Billy Martin, like Mark had told me, had gotten let go by Detroit. And so there was a little lapse in there. And that's some of the things that went on. Am I close to right on that, Mike?
Billy Martin became available late in the season when he was fired in Detroit. And at that point, the owner of the team, the owner of the Texas Rangers, the man who actually transferred the franchise from the Washington Senators to Texas, was just desperate to sell the team. And so David Clyde was a part of his sales pitch more than anything. Yes, we can draw people in here, and then Billy Martin was sort of a hood ornament. And Billy, and in fact, Whitey was shocked when they fired him. He was very upset about it because he had a plan in place for the Rangers, and they had they left him, Mark, in place, the success that he had in Kansas City probably would have occurred in Texas because the following season, 74, with Martin, they went from 105 losses to a team that almost beat the A's for the division championship the following year because one guy, Ferguson Jenkins, came in and changed, precision Hall of Fame baseball player. They were able to bring him to Texas for some reason. I mean, there were no free agency at the time. It was, they worked out a trade. And so it just shows, and so but Whitey orchestrated that thing, the trade. This is prior to his dismissal. And if he had stuck around, then there would have been a whole different prospect of Texas baseball, which never really, the American League in Dallas-Fort Worth never. Finally, the Rangers won a division championship in 1996. But you had, there's plenty of seasons of teams kind of lost in the desert and all that.
Utility.
But Whitey did have his plan in place, and he would have succeeded here. And he had, before he left, the Mets actually got in the World Series. The New York Mets in 1973 with
he formed that.
Not much, but Whitey's theory, and he told me at the time, he says, you get 3 good arms, one of them being a closer and 2 damn good starters, and you got a shortstop, you're going to compete. And if you look at his careers, it all went, both with the Royals and then with the Cardinals, that was a formula that continued to work, and I think even today it would still work.
Yeah. Well, and when I was over with the Royals, I had my good year. We competed, and then when you fall off and you go, and then they got Bruce Sutter over with the Cardinals, and like I've always said, I've always followed Whitey, and it makes sense if you got 2 to 3 starters, the other 2 is going to fall in and a little bit better because the competition, they want to compete too and be part of that team, and. Of course, Freddie Patek and Ozzie Smith are hard to beat, shortstop.
It worked out pretty well for him, but I don't know what his vision of the future was in 1973. But I'm used to, prior to that, I was covering college football, and our kids, we're going to have a heck of a team this year, and our kids are going to fight and all that. But then I go down there to spring training, and Whitey Herzog, after the first practice of the spring, said, "Oh my God!" He says, we're just 2 players away from being a contender: Babe Ruth and Sandy Koufax." And
that's Whitey.
Like that. I mean, he was talking about Rico Carty, the DH left fielder. He says, "I've seen better knees on a camel." Says he can you can time him with a sundial from home to first, and just on and on and on. And it was funny as hell, and it was the truth too. And it was just, there's nobody like him. And I think anybody who ever came in contact with Whitey Herzog could write a really terrific book.
Oh, that's why I think that anybody who's listening right now to the show should get the book Seasons in Hell. And it is a great read. The Whitey quotes are hysterical. One of my favorite Whitey quotes from the book was, "These guys are really substandard, but with our pitching, it really doesn't matter."
Pretty much.
Mark, can you hear Whitey saying that?
Oh, hell yes. The funny thing about Whitey is, and Mike might not know this, may know this, but Whitey, I always said in my book, I said, Whitey he might have had 3 meetings a year. And any of those meetings might not last over maybe the longest 2 minutes, but it was usually a few sentences, and it meant a lot, and he just walked out, and he had his commander stance where his thumbs were hanging outside his pants, his fingers were tucked inside and his thumbs were on the outside, and he'd kind of lean back on one leg and have a kind of shit-eating, frowny grin on you, and he'd talk, and a lot came out of there, So you knew to perk your ears up when Whitey was talking. That's for sure.
Well, I tell you, you had some good stories to tell with that team. I mean, bad teams sometimes have good stories. I mean, Boughton was lucky enough to be with the Pilots, and he got some good stories for his book. But you had some great stories too, like Charlie Hudson. I mean, here's a guy who usually give guys on the DL for bad shoulders or bad knees or bad elbows. Tell us why Charlie wound up on the DL.
Well, he shot himself. In his pitching hand, in fact, his left one. He was a left-handed knuckleballer, which tells you everything you know about them. But then that was another thing. Right. He says, well, finally we got somebody to come through. Says this team doesn't have enough injuries.
Well, I tell you, it's some of the things that happen on the bench, down here that go on. It's pretty much hilarious. At times, what happens during the course of a baseball game. I gotta say, I know you were in football. I mean, baseball had to be just one-upsmanship. It's gotta be because, with Whitey being there anyway, let's put it that way. Because,
well, of course, I read Whitey's book, incidentally. It's called You're Missing a Great Game, I believe. And it's a long book as far as sports books go. It's about 450, 500 pages, of which about 2.5 pages are dedicated, or he puts with his experience with the Rangers. So that was, I felt a little bit of bitterness there. Well, but the nice part of it was at the beginning of the book, I understand that he has a refrigerator that's decorated and shaped like a Budweiser beer can. So,
well, I knew that when Ken Boyer got let go, and by the way, that was probably the worst firing I've ever seen in my whole life of a major league manager. And it's pretty funny because Ken Boyer was an iconic figure there in St. Louis, but we were in Montreal and we had a doubleheader, and he got let go between games of a doubleheader. You're in a foreign country, and fortunately, Anheuser-Busch brought the Budweiser on the plane, so he was somewhat, at ease, I guess. So, but he was. Kenny just sat in the manager's office between the second game starting. So. I think it was Jack Crow. It was either Jack Crow or Red Shane Red Dog sitting there. It was Red. Red was sitting there on the bench, and Reach was up over there on deck, and I was kind of, walking around in that big old stadium. It's flat through there, and Red Dog fell asleep and had his arms crossed. He said, "Hey, look, country, Red Dog's asleep," and so he just plowed his bat right above his head and would go whop. Red just kind of. Lifted up right off the bench and woke up. Red Dog, let's get in the game. Let's go. I mean, shit like that happens, So.
Well, you got to, I obviously experienced it from a different kind of viewpoint than I did, although, again, that's just the beauty of the sport. And you can't, it's addictive, and there's just a cadence that, and 100 years from now, people are going to be packing baseball parks, and maybe soccer will be obsolete, and the rest of these sports will, but baseball, I think, will endure forever. And I'm kind of tickled to see how it's catching on in places internationally now, and not just Asia and not Latin America, but all around the world. And as soon as people find out how much fun it is to watch the game and play the game, and by the way, to any of your listeners, if you really appreciate baseball, don't coach Little League, for crying out loud. Still,
really, you tell me.
That was one thing. our era, or mine and I guess Mark's, was they had some sensational managers, and Billy Martin, came through our place, but Earl Weaver was a big part of that thing. I just used to really love to go down there and talk to Earl when he was doing his thing with the Orioles, and so some sports writer from a suburban paper came in there, and was kind of, I guess, a little bit intimidated by Earl, but anyway, the sports writer says, "Well, Earl or Mr. Weaver or whatever, what kind of advice would you give to a young Little League player coming up?" And Earl sat there for a minute and looked at him, and he says, "I hate the effing Little Leagues."
Yeah, that's about right. That's Earl, and I know he and Palmer were always at each other's throat on the bench, no matter if he was pitching or not pitching, and he'd be walking up and down the bench, and it's kind of like Martin and Jackson doing the same thing. But there was a lot of camaraderie, I guess, in a good and a bad way, in the locker room. Whether there was a birthday that day or not, always a bunch of birthday cakes out there, or somebody was. It was a major league locker room. You got to have some real cojones to walk in there. I mean, you might have had a great game the night before, but that doesn't mean you're going to get left out of the search. So it's a tough area.
I mean, the major league clubhouse, as such, it's kind of like old age. It's no place for sissies,
No, not at all. I mean, I think most people said, "You guys rah-rah," and said, "No, we're not a football team. We're the real deal down there. We're telling everybody to go to hell and kick your ass or whatever, and let's just get with it today." And you see a lot of different things, and it's really true. The winningest teams that I've ever been on, they always rubbed each other in the locker room, out of the locker room just a little bit. We were all pretty good buddies, and then when the fight broke out on the field, it was all hell. I think I was involved in, it was coined the second longest fight in the history of baseball. I think it was in Texas, and it was lasted like close to 21 minutes. I remember we had 3 players, each team had 3 players put on the disabled list that night, and they had to call AAA teams. We had to call our AAA teams, and it was 1977, actually, I want to say, and Willie Horton picked up George Brett, and Mayberry said, because the fight kind of came together the first time, and nobody kind of really fought. But, when I think it was Dennis Leonard that drilled somebody or something, then it kicked it off, and Pat Corrales was the guy that actually kicked it off, who was a coach at the time. And
Pat was here too. But yeah, go ahead. I mean, as far as that goes, the concept of the Major League Baseball player, or at least the perception is that it's allegedly a passive sport as compared to ice hockey and wrestling. But the fact is that I saw the ultimate, what I thought was the dirtiest baseball fight. And this was in 1974 in Cleveland, and it was what they call it, the 10-cent beer night riot.
Yes, right.
And this was when the fans took to the field, and the darndest display of civic disobedience I've ever seen, and it was sort of a signature event in the 1970s where it was kind of an anything goes type of thing. That the Rangers took to the field to defend their right fielder, Jeff Burroughs, with baseball bats in hand. And if you don't think they could put some whoop ass on you, they did.
Oh, yeah.
They laid some folks out big time. And so, while these guys, you know as well as I do, baseball players, Major League Baseball players, have really long extremities. They've got long legs, and they have long arms. and they will beat the living crap out of you if you don't match what you're doing. Is that correct, Mark, or not?
Oh yeah, well, I've been up in the stands out in Oakland, because we were in a fight down on the field, and the Oakland fans were trying to get some of our crap, and so we went up in the stands, and what the heck? Of course, that's the timing is so different from nowadays. It's so organized and it's so pretty and pristine, and they can't do this or they can't do that. Well, you know what? I really like the era that I grew up in. And, to try to pass that down, and everybody say I'm old school. No, I'm not really old school, because I do a lot of studies on the pitching process still, and I go a little bit further than some of the younger guys, at least I try to. And it's interesting the difference, of how far you really want to take it, but you really can't reinvent the wheel. You can polish it a little bit, though. You can shine it up and make it shine, but it's hard to reinvent the game, which is what we're seeing a lot of nowadays, it seems.
Well, I think the big difference is they've got millions upon millions of dollars invested in these guys today. So those brawls that can end a career. I mean, I go back to the one in the 1970s where Greg Nettles pummeled Bill the Spaceman Lee and pretty much changed the trajectory of his career by blowing out his shoulder. Owners don't want to see that with all the investments they have now.
Well, of course they don't. So many of these things, though, they're so spontaneous the way that generally involves a pitcher throwing a pitch that's a little bit in too much proximity to a batter's head. And so then this is when it all usually, and so what happens is that you've got two things that you can do as the hitter, and one of them is charge the mound, and you're going to look like a jerk no matter how that's going to turn out. But at the same time, all of a sudden, here it comes. And I can't remember. Actually, the classic event was when Robin Ventura charged the mound with Nolan Ryan there, and Nolan got a Mike Tyson on it.
That 47-year-old man beat up that 20-something-year-old man with the bat.
Right. But anyway, these are again. I so much of this it relates to our era of the 70s, but it's much more expensive than that, and frankly, it's a lot more important. And I think that more than anything, it's kind of like talking to World War II veterans. You better get these oral histories before they die, because you got some great stories, and you don't let these stories die with the person simply because they might be too shy to tell the stories.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons we do the show is we bring on folks like yourself and former teammates and adversaries of Mark every week, and we talk about those days because in a couple of decades we're not going to have anyone telling these stories, and everything is going to be so antiseptic in baseball. And the 70s, the late 60s, the early 70s, mid 70s, that was an exciting time. A lot of different things. The game was changing. Teams were moving. I mean, the Rangers were only in their second year when you covered them in 1973. They basically were bounced out of Washington D.C. and had to come someplace because they couldn't draw flies over there.
Well, there's the story of how the Rangers came here is even as bizarre as the team itself. And Mark will be the first to tell you the original ballpark that they played in had all the charm and tradition of a gravel pit. I mean, it was a mess, and it was hotter than the hinges of hell. And I'm surprised anybody would come out to watch that, but they did, and simply because of the love of the game and maybe the love of cold beer, I guess. That here was my thing. I grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, when there was no Major League Baseball around here. This is the early 50s, and I'm a little kid, and I'm listening to the Fort Worth Cats on the radio. And in the 70s, but they're selling Southern Select beer. And it really tasted, God almighty, and I remember that, white beer, and so finally I said, doggone it, this is about 10 o'clock at night, and the Fort Worth Cats had just beaten the San Antonio Missions 4-1 on the radio, and they were selling this beer. And I went downstairs, and I popped one open. I had to have it. I'm 8 years old, and so I drank a can of beer, listened to the baseball game. And I've been doing that ever since, and I'm thinking about filing a class action suit against baseball for turning me into a drunk.
Well, there's a lot of ball players that have hit that note as well, so, and I can actually vouch for that. So,
well, baseball was a drinking sport back in those days, by the way.
Sure it was. Yeah.
In fact, one of my my little snapshot from the era of innocence before the free agents took place. It was the last game of the season, and the Rangers had played in 1975 at the old Comiskey Park, and go get on the bus, go to the airport, same old routine. But the bus driver got lost in South Chicago, and he's weaving around, and Mark, you continue.
Yeah.
Bus drivers really take a lot of crap from baseball. But anyway, so the guy, and then all of a sudden in the middle of this guy speeds past the bus going 80 miles an hour and runs into a telephone pole. And all those guys pile off the bus because they wanted to see a dead guy. You could see the look in there, oh, good. And so they got up there and they were very disappointed he wasn't dead. And as I described it, he was wearing like an overcoat of blood and broken glass, but he was And so one of the players, the late Joe Levito, looked in through the passenger side and says to the guy, "You look like you could use a drink," and handed him a little bottle of this airline vodka, those little airline bottles.
Right.
And so it's not just, I guess, genuine, spontaneous behavior that initiated the spark that made me want to write that book and lie awake at night sometimes at age 75 and reminisce about that stuff. It makes me feel good.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah. I mean, everybody always talks about, some of the stuff. Well, I could have gone deeper into the clubhouse and been a little bit more malicious. And I said, yeah, I could do that. But I chose not to be, too malicious because I got a second book coming out here this next week. And it's kind of a series because I'm ADD as hell, Mike. And so, I didn't know I could write, so I started writing, and so I wrote 3 books, but the last one's on coaching them, but the second one's on just, my farm, the character of the formation. So, it's kind of like, why in the hell should a kid out in a soybean and cotton field make a damn Major League Baseball team and still be doing it to this day? So, I mean, there's all different sides of, the different, sides of people. And you're sitting there looking at why people write books. It's sometimes it's 99% boredom and 1%. You're hanging in there to see a finished product, maybe. So whatever. And
well, I've
get
had
through it
published, and if you can explain to me why the book writing process is, there are a lot of people who I think really won't do it, but if once you get into it, there's no halfway, there's no half measures. I guess to a certain extent, it might be like trying to pitch in the major leagues. You can't go at it half-ass. You really have to lay it all out there.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, you do. I know, Boughton wrote his out there, and he didn't. I think it was his second book. He didn't use a ghostwriter, and then Billy Sample, he didn't use a ghostwriter, and then there was a guy named the Professor. He was a pitcher in 1952, somewhere in that era.
Oh, Jim Brosnan.
Yeah, that was it. And he wrote a book. Yeah, is that right?
That's a terrific book, The Long Season. Is that
it's interesting to sit here and listen to the players that, have written the books, and see the description of what's coming out of their mouth. Like you did a description here from a writer's viewpoint, which I like, because you don't see too many of those in a sense. You see writers who've written those books, but, the beat writer that's been there every day in and out of every, the locker room, the bus, the plane, the hotel, you're you're seeing it all. You're coming at the wrong time of night. You're seeing the right things happen.
Well, let's see what the fan really doesn't and couldn't necessarily grasp is if you're the fan of a team and you turn on the TV one night and they're in Chicago and the next night they're in Boston. Well, if you're the fan and you turn on the TV, that's one thing. But if you're the player and the entourage, being the media, and then we all travel together, you've got to get from Chicago to Boston, or you've got to get from New York to L.A. and all that. And you just can't, switch. You actually have to get on the bus and get on the plane and go to the hotel and do, and so the secret to success in the major leagues is simply stamina and being able to withstand the incredible the fatigue of that. I mean, switching time zones. I mean, you're living, at least I did, in 7 months of jet lag, really.
Yeah.
And so if somebody said, well, that was a pretty awful story you wrote, well, I would say, well, you look inside my brain what it is right now, and you can understand why I wrote it that way.
Exactly.
I don't think they firmly grasped that you were running around with a fax machine and a typewriter trying to put these things together and get them submitted for a deadline so the people back home can read them.
Right.
Yeah, the mojo wire, we call it.
What'd you call it?
The mojo wire. Actually, Hunter S. Thompson, this guy, the Rolling Stone dope freak, came up with that, but that's what we call. That's another story. We wrote. I wouldn't know an iPhone. What in the world are they talking about? I mean, all the stuff that they use now, and obviously to transmit stories on. I used a manual typewriter and a mojo wire, and that's the way it worked.
The funny thing too is a lot of people back then didn't know it. I mean, when we got on planes, we knocked all the seats down and we played cards. There was a group that played cards. There was a group that had the headphone sets on because we had the headphone set on. And you'd pass by the guy with the headphone sets on. You could still, see his head, throbbing, from how loud it was, the music. And then you had the reporters and the administrators up front and the management. And then it was all different back then. And the stewardesses and flight attendants knew better than to ask us to buckle up because they know we're not going to buckle up. It ain't going to happen.
Well, that's true. Of course, now with the Rangers, the media consisted of two other guys like me, and and so we were allowed to mingle on the plane. They put us back there they had kind of a rotation. It was almost all charter, although I don't know if you remember this or not, Mark, but they had a big gasoline shortage in 1974.
Yeah.
So charter planes were kind of hard to get, and so certain teams the Rangers, on 3 or 4 occasions, actually flew on a commercial flight. And the way that worked was the agreement with the Players Association was that what they do is they would buy out first class, and then you'd get the first class amenity for the guys in the back. In other words, one guy to a row, and you get the drinks and the food and so forth. And then in the very back of the plane, you'd see about 5 rows of regular people, passengers, locked in there, 3 abreast. And they would see these guys getting loose. And I'll never forget the expressions on the faces of these normal airline passengers. And occasionally some of the more adventurous players would find somebody that they found attractive, and most of the regular passengers says, "Come on up with us, baby."
We did that. We did that a few times. Yeah, she can come on, but leave her alone. She can come on, and so you get the 2 for 3 seating, but then you get the good looking chick, and she can sit back here with us. So, and then you had all the people just sitting there glaring at you, and like you said, God, what in the hell are these guys all about? And I said, well, and you know what it is? It's time warp and it's time jet lag and it's everything else. And I threw a ball game one day in St. Louis. It was 2 innings and it was 136 degrees on turf. And I lost 9 pounds that day, and we were flying out 2 hours later to to Los Angeles, you know. So, I mean, I'm sitting there with Anheuser-Busch product spread eagle naked on the doggone floor. And I say naked, you know, just spread eagle. Nobody bothered me because I had a beer in my clutched in my right hand. I was just trying to get some Z's a little bit right there and just tone down from, you know, just basically sweating to death the last two. It's 136 degrees. You can't lose at that turf, you know. It's terrible. So,
good God, that's just about.
On the carpet?
Yeah, no shit. It really was. It really was. It was terrible. Well, there's so many funny things that happened on those flights. I mean, we had a fight break out on a flight once, you know, and we were going between Pittsburgh and Chicago, and the fight broke out, and carrier window was cracked, and the damn things came down. And the pilot got on there, and he said, I don't know what the hell you guys are doing back there. I'm going to set this son of a bitch down in Cleveland. As far as you guys, you can frickin', you know, bus it from Cleveland to Chicago if you don't settle down. So shut the fuck down. And so, you know, so it finally calmed down, you know. But you're getting players and people off of players and people, so, you know, the plane's going back and forth a little bit, you know. Got some big bodies floating around back there.
Well, of course, when Billy Martin was the manager, you'd see fights on airplanes involving the manager and all kinds of people. There was a famous incident in '74 where Billy punched up the traveling secretary.
Oh, really?
Old man on the flight. And
wow.
So, yeah, of course, with Billy, that was
standard procedure.
You know, that somebody says, we left that event out of the papers and we got chastised because the manager, the guy that he beat up was a hell of a guy and said, just kind of avoid this. But as I said later, if we had run stories every time Billy Martin got in a fight in 1974, there wouldn't have been enough room in the paper for Watergate stories, you know. So,
yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
And I think Billy Martin wound up being more embattled than Nixon by that point. How many players did he actually wind up fighting with that year?
Well, of course, Billy's deal was, I don't know about Nixon, but Billy's deal was the sucker punch. So.
Yeah, he did do that. Yeah.
Well, Billy wasn't a big guy, so he had to get a shot in first, right, with those big players?
Well, sometimes Billy didn't always win. He didn't, and whenever he lost, it was like he always blamed it on new shoes. I was wearing new shoes, and so
that's a good one. I know Billy and Whitey were pretty good buddies because they played together, and Williams, you know, out in Oakland, the manager.
Well, which one? Dick Williams.
Yeah. Dick and Whitey were good buddies, I know. And Dick Williams is a real good manager. And you know with Whitey who could manage and who couldn't manage. You know, he'd kind of say certain little things, innuendos on certain occasions. You know, and you could actually see it, you know, who could control a team the best. And there's some guys that hung around a long time that couldn't manage it. They had good teams. They could write the lineup in any way they wanted, and then, you know, they'd still come close to winning the ball game, you know. But it's guys like, you know, Whitey and Martin and Dick Williams and Earl Weaver, those kind of guys that, you know, they knew how to, you know, how to compete with what they had, you know. So
they also knew how to manage a bullpen, and they also knew how to manage or how to coordinate the warm-up structure in the bullpen. They knew that you shouldn't warm a guy up sitting down and warm him up again. They knew things like that a lot of people didn't know. And I think that in the long run, that had a lot to do with why they won and why they didn't.
I think the rap on Billy was that he burnt out starting pitching.
Yeah, that would be true.
I had a couple of pitchers tell me that they didn't think that Billy knew very much about pitching, but he had this guy, old goat, Art Fowler.
He followed him from town to town.
You know, and that was his
drinking buddy.
He did know how to manage a bullpen, but his whole the pitching coach's or Art Fowler was this is how he would bring the young pitchers along. Throw strikes, kid. Babe Ruth's dead. And that was all he had on.
Yeah, that's about right. You know, I remember Fred Stanley telling me, and I had Fred as a farm director, and he said, yeah, Billy, I was at shortstop, and I'd come in on the mound, I just listened to him and cross my arms, and, you know, Art came out there one day, and, you know, Billy didn't want to go out there, and he said, and he's kind of walking up and down the dugout. He says, Art! He said, what, Billy? He says, get your ass out there and get that goddamn pitcher in line. And he said, get your ass out there. So he'd kind of go moseying out there, and he'd call time, and he said, and there'd be like 4 or 5 guys out there, and he said, I don't know what you guys are doing out here, but Billy's pissed. And he said, just get him out. You know, just get him out. Let's get out of this, okay? Let's go. Bye. You know, so you know, that was Art Fowler, you know. Oh, shit. I can only imagine that happening. But there is a lot to it.
Yeah, actually, my favorite Billy Martin moment when he was the manager of the Rangers was he had the owner of the team, the guy who had bought the team off bought Billy Martin a membership to a very fancy country club in Fort Worth, and Billy went out there one day with his pal Mickey Mantle, and apparently they got overserved and misbehaved, and so I walk into Billy's office, and about an hour before game, he's reading his mail. He says, "Oh, look at this." He says, "This is a drink tab from Shady Oaks Country Club in Fort Worth." He says they owe him $3,000. He says, "How in the hell do they expect me to pay that bill if I'm to drive out to that country club and pay the bill if I'm no longer welcome on the premises?" And he widened the thing up and threw it in the wastebasket and laughed for 5 minutes.
That sounds about right.
You guys just don't come along. You know, if you're working in a normal career in insurance or law or banking or something like that, you don't encounter these kinds of people. And therefore, you know, I'm not going to say I feel sorry for bankers and lawyers, but
right.
Just right. Then I think that you know, we maybe have had a little bit better life because of it. I hope so.
Well, I think with the nature of the game today, you'll never see characters and managers like that because they're into the numbers, the sabermetrics number guys, and not the guys who can work with people and fly by the seat of their pants and make smart, quick decisions at a snap of a finger. It doesn't look like they want those kind of guys managing ball clubs anymore.
Well, the Rangers, for instance, have this young G. You know, he's got a degree from Brown University, and he uses phrases like counterintuitive and this kind of stuff. He doesn't chew tobacco.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure.
And now they're putting this thing together where they're trying to get the talk around here is the Rangers, among other teams, are trying to bring in the Japanese Babe Ruth, they call it. His name is Otani, and he can pitch and he can hit. And so the Rangers have spent the last 6 months training the scouting staff to speak fluent Japanese and some other computer aspects that are very important now to wherever they're going. And the question is, why would a guy like Otani, why would he sign with an American League team where he can't swing the bat as a pitcher? Right. You know, that just makes any sense to me. But
there is a lot of truth to that because the way the game's changed here with the, like Mark said, the analytics, but also I went to the conference and there were 60 teams. I was in Cuba and there were 60 teams there, and not teams, countries there, and that's how many people, baseball federations you have in the world. You know, give or take, you can. You know, if it's coordinated how many awards you got going on in Africa to how many baseball teams you have with countries. But it's kind of interesting just to sit there and listen to the skill levels that they talk about. In this country right now, there's a shortage of skill level because now they just want to play games. All these kids. Oh, I played a game. Well, but did you learn anything? Because they can't really learn skill level because so there's really no hope sometimes. So I look at the year 2025. Are your teams going to be composed of mainly Latino and European and other foreign players from around the world versus the American? And it's gotten bigger and bigger. It's close to 35% right now of Major League ball players that are Latino.
Yeah, in fact, I read a thing where a Cuban refugee in the United States claims that he's being racially stereotyped. Mm-hmm. That's the way he's talking about it. He says, well, the only job I can get is playing double-A ball in Birmingham.
On that note, I want to thank Mike for being with us today to talk about his great book, Seasons in Hell, which describes the 1973 to 1975 Texas Rangers, some what we consider old-time and fun-time baseball. Mike, we're glad to have you on the show, and hopefully like to have you back again sometime soon, but I hope you had a good time with us today.
I had a great time, and anytime, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get my own podcast going, and I'm going to have you guys on. So
outstanding.
Outstanding. We're definitely going to sign up for that. And Mike, what we do, which is tradition over here, since I'm the starter and today's starters never go a complete game, you got to go to the pen. And so I go to the pen and I bring in the big righty to close it on out.
Well, here's what I generally try to do anyway. I throw peas at the knees, no pies in the eyes, no wall balls, and you'll be just fine. Have a good day.
Take care, everyone.